dad do this a lot, but I'm not quite sure if I've got it down yet, but hopefully I do. Okay, so this past summer, I was given the privilege of going to Honduras. So if you're like me and not exactly the best with world geography, Honduras is actually in Central America. It is not a city in Mexico, as you can get confused. But there it is right there on the map. And so I was there for a period of, well, I was there for 2 months, but 7 weeks at the mission site. We were actually in a smaller area, La Ermita Talanga, which is about 45 minutes to an hour north of the capital, depending on how fast you're driving, I guess. This was the mission site that we stayed in, and we were working with the Heart of Christ Ministries, and this ministry is basically, it's a refuge home for women and children who have been victims of abuse and domestic violence. And it's also a home for children with special conditions. And so their vision is right here. Their vision is to serve God's people in Honduras in a manner that clearly demonstrates the heart of Christ, meeting their needs, discipling to them, rescuing them out of their suffering, and empowering them to do the same for others. And so here is the team. So I was very blessed to be able to experience this internship with 2 other girls. There's Evelyn. She is also, both of them are actually also students at ACU. We did this under the Worldwide Witness program. And so there's Evelyn. She's a Christian ministry and psychology major. And there's Jennifer in the middle, who's a social work major. And we were working with, pictured here, missionaries Lee and Gracie Murphy. And so Lee is, he graduated from Auburn University, and he served for 10 years at a local church in Alabama, northern Alabama. And Gracie, she graduated from the University of Northern Alabama as well, and she served as a specialized foster care provider for 8 years in the state of Massachusetts, and she was also a bookkeeper, and she worked in the media doing editing, and she was a writer for a couple of years. This was prior to going to Honduras, and then when she was actually in Honduras, she created the first ever victims program for Honduras, and she works closely with a lot of the local and the national authorities. So this was our team, but this was my family for a period of 2 months. So not your typical family for sure, and the thing that's different about the Heart of Christ Ministries compared to most local orphanages is that they're more than just a refuge, but they're, a family. They try to make it to where it can be more of a family environment for these women and these children. And so, unlike most local orphanages, these children and women have the option of actually staying for as long as they need to, or feel like they need to stay. Because most orphanages, by the time you're 18, then you have to leave. But they have the option for staying as long as they need to, or as long as they want to. And even if they choose to leave, they still have the option of coming back home, as they would call it home. And so I thought that was very neat. This ministry is actually fairly new. They began in 2005, and so it has significantly grown within just a span of a few months, as far as the number of children and women that they have with them now. And as I said, it's not your average family. And behind each face, there is, of course, a story to be told, and I would like to share some of those stories with you right now. So first, we have Carla and Alejandro, very precious little boy. Carla is 16 years old, and she grew up in a family that was very abusive, and she was raped by her father, and which makes Alejandro her son, but at the same time her brother, which was something that she had mentioned one time, and she said that, you know, it was very hard for her to just look at her son and know that her son is also her brother, you know, and so it's kind of heartbreaking when you think about that. And so Alejandro is about 1, almost 2, and his mother, Carla, actually escaped the mission at one point in February, but they were able to find her and bring her back. But she was actually only there for about a month when we were there, because a lot was going on at the ministry, and she was just causing too much trouble. And we even found out that she was kind of conniving with one of the nannies, trying to get out and escape, and maybe even sell Alejandro to somebody. So before any of that could happen, they decided, okay, we need to just send her back to INFA, which is another local orphanage. And so she and Alejandro right now are not together. Alejandro is still at the mission, but Carla is no longer there. So that was kind of a hard situation there. But hopefully, you know, especially for Alejandro, we have high hopes for him. And despite the fact, you know, that he is a result of incest, like, it's a blessing that he has been developing normally, and he's a very precious little boy. So that's those two. And this is Diego, one of our favorites. Diego was he's the oldest of the 3 toddlers that we had. And Diego was probably our little lost boy, because he was pretty much abandoned by his mother. And his mother actually was with Carla when she first tried to escape, except they never found her and never brought her back. So he was pretty much abandoned by her mother, and her story is that she was raped by her grandfather. So Diego's father is also his great-grandfather. So there's a lot of that going on at the home, just like situations where these kids came from. Next we have Moises. Some of you may have heard about this little boy, because I know we've talked about him a little bit in chapel, and we've prayed for him for his operation and all that. But Moises is our miracle baby. He's our miracle boy. He's now 2 years old, just turned 2 in October. But he was abandoned at birth because, well, his mother obviously didn't want him for this reason, and which is very sad. But he was abandoned at birth. No one wanted him because they all thought, you know, he was going to die. And he spent 6 months at the local orphanage. And then the Heart of Christ Ministries took him in for basically end-of-life care. But by God's grace, and it's just amazing how they were able to go through the surgery. But he was able to have surgery in February successfully at the local public hospital in Tegucigalpa. And right now, as you can see on the picture over there at the right, he's perfectly normal, and it's just amazing to see how well he's recovered. And he's just functioning like a normal little boy would. And, you know, he'll walk every now and then, still kind of compensating for the weight, you know, just because he got used to it. But he's perfectly fine now, and so he's our miracle baby, and it's just been amazing to see how his life is just a testimony of God's power, and just how that's all worked out really great. Okay, next we have Haiti and Christopher. Okay, at the time, I think Christopher is just barely, I would say, two months old, yeah. Haiti, we were able to be there for her 17th birthday. But her story is that she was basically, she grew up in a very neglectful, abusive family, and she was raped, and her family abandoned her when that happened, and so Heart of Christ took her in. And, you know, she also went through drug addiction. She was on the streets in the city, got into drugs and drug dealing and all that. So she's also had a very rough background as well. But it was very just encouraging to see how much she had grown the time that we got to spend with her. And right now, she actually is beginning high school, just that started this past October. So we have high hopes for her as well. Alicia and Ashley, baby Ashley. How old would you say Alicia is? Any guesses? 13. She's actually 16. But when I first met her, I really didn't think she was that young. I thought she was a lot older, but, or maybe that's just my perspective, I don't know. But I thought she was a lot older, but then again, you know, once I learned more about her background, you could see why. It's because she got into a lot of, she just had a really rough, like, beginning, and so she got into drugs, she got into gangs and stuff like that. The husband, or the father of the baby, actually was murdered because of, I think it was a gang fight, and she actually got shot too, but thankfully her life was spared. But for the baby, it's a miracle that she's been developing normally and she doesn't have any defects, because while Alicia was pregnant with Ashley, she was actually still like taking in drugs and doing all that. So it's been amazing to see how Ashley has turned out, and of course we're really thankful for that too. Let's see, next we have, okay, these next two girls, we didn't meet till maybe halfway through our internship. We just kind of had girls coming in and out, and so this is Melissa and her baby Katie, pictured here, and she's about, I think, 6 months in this picture. But Melissa was abused by her family, and I think when she was very young, she was maybe 12 or 13, but she was given away to a 48-year-old man to basically be, you know, his wife, and so, and then he decides to leave her after he gets her pregnant, and so it's just like, okay, great, good job, now. But yeah, it's just like seeing how these things happen, and just like hearing these stories from these girls is really heartbreaking, and so you can just imagine, you know, how hard it was just to hear their stories and not really knowing what to say, you know. But now, Melissa, she's definitely in a better place, and she's starting 3rd grade, so hopefully she'll keep going. And the other girl, is Milagro, came to us a few months pregnant. She's only 14. Yeah. Her mother left her when she was very little, and her father basically left her with her stepmother, which eventually, you know, she was very abusive, and then eventually also left her. And she ended up just staying in a boarding house by herself, which was owned by some person who also owned a bar, and he forced her to work the bar and serve drinks, and so eventually that led to her getting raped, and that's how she got pregnant. And so, yeah, she and Melissa came to us probably 1 month into the internship, but it was pretty tough when they first arrived because they just really didn't want to be there, and I can understand that. But let's see. She recently gave birth this past October to a baby girl, and thankfully, you know, she loves her baby, and you know, you can understand how that would be hard, especially, you know, if she didn't really want that to happen, of course. But the baby's healthy, they're both healthy, and so just continue to keep them in prayers and hope that they both do well. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not only a home for those who've been victims of rape and incest and domestic violence, but we also have like children and other girls who've special conditions, like Karen here, who's I think about 20, but she is actually deaf and mute. And so if I thought going to Honduras not really knowing Spanish was going to be hard, it's extra hard with her because she can't hear or speak at all. And so finding ways to communicate to her was pretty challenging. But yes, Karen is deaf and mute, and she spent many years at the local orphanage, but eventually made her way to Heart of Christ Ministries, and her family was also quite abusive, and they made her just beg on the streets, and so she's definitely, you know, just in a better place now, thankfully. And then there's these two lovely girls. There's Erica on the top right, and then Ivania. Both of them have